Little Thumbling. Once upon a time, in a tiny house in the heart of a lush forest, lived a couple who longed for a child, no matter how small. One day, their wish was granted in an unusual way. They had a son who was no bigger than a thumb, and they named him Thumbling. Despite his small size, Thumbling was brave and full of adventure. One day, he decided to explore the world beyond his home. To keep him safe on his journey, his mother sewed him a tiny outfit from scraps of cloth. Thumbling traveled through the forest, where he met many creatures. He learned to ride on the back of a rabbit, and even managed to tame a fierce mouse by speaking kindly to it. With each adventure, Thumbling grew wiser about the ways of the forest. One day, Thumbling found himself near a farm where he saw some farmers working. Wanting to see more, he climbed onto the hoof of a large horse. The horse, amused by Thumbling's courage, gently trotted around to give him a good view. After many adventures, Thumbling decided to return home. He had missed his parents dearly and had many stories to share. His parents were overjoyed to see him safe and listened with wonder as he recounted his travels. Thumbling continued to live with his parents, helping them with his clever ideas and brave actions, proving that even the smallest person can make a big difference. And they all lived happily ever after, always cherishing the big heart of their little Thumbling. Mrs. Fox's Wedding. Once upon a time, in a cozy den in the heart of the forest, there lived a wise and beautiful Mrs. Fox. She was very kind and clever, and all the animals in the forest admired her. Sadly, Mr. Fox, her husband, had passed away, and Mrs. Fox was left alone. One day, Mrs. Fox decided it was time to find a new husband. Many suitors came to ask for her hand in marriage, each hoping to win her heart. The first to arrive was a proud wolf. He boasted about his strength and cunning, but Mrs. Fox wanted a husband who was kind and thoughtful. Next came a fierce bear, who showed off his powerful paws and loud roar. Mrs. Fox appreciated his bravery, but felt he was not gentle enough. Then came a clever cat, who promised to keep Mrs. Fox entertained with his tricks and agility. However, Mrs. Fox still did not feel he was the right one. Finally, a kind and gentle fox arrived. He was humble and spoke kindly to Mrs. Fox. He showed respect for all the animals in the forest and offered to help Mrs. Fox with anything she needed. Mrs. Fox felt a warmth in her heart and knew he was the one. Mrs. Fox and the kind fox were married in a beautiful ceremony attended by all the forest animals. They lived happily ever after, caring for each other and their friends in the forest. Mrs. Fox's new husband proved to be as loving and wise as she had hoped, and their days were filled with joy and laughter. And so, the story of Mrs. Fox's wedding reminds us that kindness and respect are more important than strength and cleverness, and that true love is found in the heart. The Elves. Once upon a time, there was a poor shoemaker who lived in a small village. Despite his hard work, he could never earn enough to make ends meet. One evening, he cut out the last pieces of leather he had left and prepared them to make shoes the next morning. Tired, he went to bed, hoping for a miracle. The next morning, to his amazement, he found a beautiful pair of shoes already made on his workbench. He sold the shoes at a good price, and with the money, he bought more leather. That night, he cut out the new leather and went to bed. Again, in the morning, there was a perfectly crafted pair of shoes waiting for him. This continued for many nights. The shoemaker would prepare the leather, and by morning, a new pair of shoes would appear. His shop became famous, and people came from far and wide to buy his shoes. The shoemaker and his wife were curious about who was helping them, so one night, they decided to stay awake and watch. To their surprise, they saw two tiny elves working diligently, sewing and stitching the shoes with great care. The shoemaker and his wife were grateful and wanted to repay the elves for their kindness. They decided to make clothes for the little helpers. The shoemaker's wife sewed tiny clothes and shoes for the elves, and the shoemaker crafted small hats. The next night, instead of leather, they left the tiny clothes on the workbench. When the elves arrived and saw the gifts, they were delighted. They put on their new clothes and danced with joy. From that night on, the elves never returned, but the shoemaker continued to prosper. The shoemaker and his wife always remembered the elves with gratitude. Thanks to the elves' help, they lived a happy and prosperous life. And so, the story of the helpful elves was passed down through generations, reminding everyone of the importance of kindness and gratitude. Old Dog Sultan. Once upon a time, there was a loyal old dog named Sultan. He had served his master faithfully for many years, but now he was old and weak. One day, Sultan's master decided it was time to get a new dog, and he planned to get rid of Sultan. Sultan was very sad and worried about his future. He went to his friend, the wolf, and told him about his master's plan. The wolf felt sorry for Sultan and came up with an idea to help him. The next day, the wolf sneaked into the farm and pretended to steal the master's baby. Sultan sprang into action, barking loudly and chasing the wolf away. He saved the baby and brought it back to his grateful master. Seeing how brave and loyal Sultan still was, the master changed his mind and decided to keep Sultan. He praised Sultan and promised to take care of him for the rest of his life. Sultan was happy and thankful for the wolf's help. The wolf asked Sultan to repay the favor by letting him steal a sheep from the farm. Sultan did not want to betray his master, so he told the wolf he couldn't help him. The wolf became angry and decided to fight Sultan. They agreed to meet in the forest for a showdown. Sultan was worried, but a three-legged cat, who was also Sultan's friend, offered to help. When the wolf saw Sultan and the cat together, he thought the cat was a fierce fighter and got scared. He ran away and never bothered Sultan again. Sultan lived the rest of his days in peace, loved and cared for by his master. He was happy knowing he had true friends who would help him when he needed it. And so, Sultan and his master lived happily ever after, showing that loyalty and bravery are always rewarded. Sleeping Beauty. Once upon a time, there was a king and queen who had a beautiful baby girl. They were so happy and invited all the fairies in the land to a grand celebration for the princess. Each fairy gave the princess a special gift, like beauty and kindness. But one fairy, who was not invited, was very angry. She came to the celebration and cast a spell on the baby princess. She said that on her 16th birthday, the princess would prick her finger on a spinning wheel and fall into a deep sleep for 100 years. Everyone was very sad. One kind fairy had not yet given her gift. She said that the princess would not die, but only fall into a deep sleep, and a prince's kiss would wake her up. The king and queen tried to protect their daughter by burning all the spinning wheels in the kingdom. But on her 16th birthday, the princess found an old spinning wheel in a hidden room of the castle. She pricked her finger and fell into a deep sleep, just as the fairy had said. The whole castle fell asleep with her. Everyone slept for 100 years, while a thick forest grew around the castle, hiding it from view. One day, a brave prince came to the kingdom. He had heard the story of the sleeping princess and wanted to find her. He cut through the thick forest and found the hidden castle. Inside, he saw everyone fast asleep. The prince found the princess lying on a bed, looking as beautiful as ever. He leaned down and gave her a kiss. At that moment, the spell was broken, and the princess woke up. The whole castle woke up too. The prince and the princess fell in love and got married. They lived happily ever after, and the kingdom rejoiced. And so, the brave prince and the beautiful princess lived in peace and happiness for the rest of their lives.